here's a question that should be keeping every coaching group in World Rugby up at night. If a team won back-to-back World Cups, dominated 2 consecutive rugby championships, swept through Europe without a single defeat, and scored tries at a rate no previous generation of that squad had ever managed, and then their own attack coach looked at all of that and said they were by no means perfect yet, what exactly is coming? That's not a rhetorical question. That's the most important question in World Rugby right now, and almost nobody outside South Africa is asking it loudly enough. Tony Brown said it himself, plainly, without hesitation, at a press conference in Cape Town. No rugby team can look at the Springboks and say, if we shut this down, we win the test match. Think about what that actually means, and think about who said it. Not a journalist, not a fan. The man who has been inside the system every single day for 2 years. The man who knows exactly where the gaps still are. The man who knows what they haven't unlocked yet. And he's telling the world there is no single answer to this team. No one thing you can take away that makes the problem manageable. What follows isn't a celebration of what the Springboks have already done. It's an explanation of what is still coming. But to understand where this is going, you first need to understand the decision that almost everyone in rugby called a mistake, and why the people who called it that missed something fundamental. Go back to February 2024, 3 months after the World Cup triumph in Paris. The Springboks had just become back-to-back world champions through a system built on forward dominance, suffocating defense, and a kicking game so precise it made opposition coaches question their own game plans. They had won with that system twice. The temptation for most organizations would have been to protect it, trust the formula, do more of the same. Instead, Rassie Erasmus hired Tony Brown, a former All Blacks fly half, a man who had coached Japan and brought their famously attack-first, space-hunting philosophy to the global stage. A man from the rugby culture that South African rugby had spent decades measuring itself against. The reaction inside the game split exactly the way it always does when something genuinely new is happening. People inside the system called it a coup, a proper one, a move that said more about where South Africa was going than any tactical announcement ever could. The traditionalists were less sure. The concern stated plainly that a New Zealander would pull the Springboks away from the set piece and the kicking game that had delivered 2 World Cup trophies, that he would soften one of rugby's great nations from within, that the identity that took generations to build would be diluted by someone who had never lived it. Rassie heard every word of that debate, and he signed Brown anyway. What happened in the 2 seasons that followed didn't just silence the critics. It produced numbers that should make every opposition coach in the world genuinely uncomfortable. Since Brown joined, the Springboks won the 2024 Rugby Championship, then the 2025 Rugby Championship, back-to-back titles in the competition's current format, the first time South Africa has achieved that. They swept through Europe on 2 separate end-of-year tours without a defeat, and across the 2025 season, they broke their own internal attacking records in ways that would have seemed impossible before Brown walked through the door. The numbers are stark. Across the 2025 Rugby Championship, the Springboks led the entire competition in tries scored with 24, in line breaks with 50, in running meters with over 3,000. They recorded their highest average points per game in the competition since the professional era began. But here's the number that stops you cold. Under Brown, compared to the pre-Brown era, the Springboks built 27 more rucks per game and made 40 more passes per game. Not slightly more, not incrementally more. 27 more rucks and 40 more passes per game. And they simultaneously retained one of the lowest turnover counts per carry in the Rugby Championship. They didn't just play more, they played smarter. The extra width and the extra phases didn't cost them the ball, they cost the opposition the game. But statistics only tell you what happened. They don't tell you how, and the how is where this story gets genuinely fascinating, because what Brown built inside the Springbok system is something rugby has never quite seen before. Brown arrived with a specific brief, not to change the Springboks, but to expand them. He described it with the kind of clarity that only comes from someone who understood the assignment completely from day one. I'm not going to teach the Springboks to play like the All Blacks. I'm going to try and coach them my way and get them playing the game I want to try and play. That single sentence is the entire Tony Brown philosophy in one breath. Power is no longer the end point of a Springbok attack. It's the trigger. A carry into contact creates defensive imbalance, and that imbalance is immediately exploited. Tip-on passes, late support lines, forwards staying alive beyond the tackle, in ways that previous Springbok generations were never coached to do. The 1-3-3-1 pod system Brown introduced gave the tight five forwards a completely new identity in open play. Locks throwing tip passes at the defensive line, isolating defenders, and creating seams for the outside backs in spaces that previously only arrived from set piece. When that works, and across the 2025 season, it worked at a rate that produced a 73-0 victory with 10 different scores in a single test. It's the most complete attacking performance international rugby has seen in the professional era. Now, here is the part that most rugby media got completely wrong, and understanding why they got it wrong reveals something important about what Rassie Erasmus was actually thinking when he made this hire. The critics who said appointing a New Zealander as Springbok attack coach was a risk to South African rugby's identity weren't just wrong about the outcome, they fundamentally misunderstood what Rassie Erasmus was actually doing. The surface logic had scope. South African rugby has a specific culture, a specific physical profile, and a specific way of approaching the game that took generations to build. Importing someone from outside that tradition carried a real risk of diluting it. That concern was legitimate in theory. In practice, it missed the point entirely. Rassie never hired Brown to replace the Springbok identity. He hired him because he understood something that very few coaches in world rugby ever truly grasp. The same forward-dominant, kicking-heavy system that won 2 World Cups would eventually be mapped and solved. Not immediately, not even in one cycle, but over time, every opposition coaching group would find a way to neutralize the primary threat, if there was only one primary threat to neutralize. Rassie understood that the most dangerous version of the Springboks would be one where opponents couldn't simply overcommit to shutting down the set piece and the aerial contest, because doing so would leave them exposed to something equally lethal in the wide channels. Brown gave the Springboks a second answer to every defensive question. Teams now face a genuine dilemma every time they game plan against South Africa. Commit to the set-piece battle and leave space out wide, or defend the wit and leave yourself exposed to the carry. Neither option is safe. Both cost you points. That is what no coaching group in the world has a complete answer to, and that is what Brown built, without losing a single element of what made the Springboks the Springboks. The scrum is still the weapon it always was. Jerry Flannery, who joined alongside Brown in 2024, built a defensive system that finished the 2025 season as the most efficient in the Rugby Championship. The Springboks ended that campaign with the extraordinary distinction of being simultaneously the competition's most productive attacking side and its most miserly defensive one. Nobody else in World Rugby has achieved both in the same season. Nobody. Brown summarized it simply. We can win with defense, we can win with scrum, we can win with the kicking game, we can win with counterattack, we can win with turnover attack, we can win with set-piece attack. So I think we are a lot more dangerous as a rugby team now. And then he added the word that changes everything: push. It's exciting to see where we can push it, where they can push it from a team that was already the best in the world. But here is the detail that almost nobody in rugby media reported, and when you hear it, you will understand exactly how much the rest of the world already fears what is being built in South Africa. When New Zealand Rugby was searching for a new coaching group, Tony Brown was part of the conversation. The coaching package of Jamie Joseph and Brown, who had worked together previously, was considered seriously. New Zealand Rugby were fully aware that Brown's contract with South African Rugby stood between them and that combination. Read that again slowly. New Zealand, the nation that built the All Blacks tradition, the nation that produced Tony Brown himself, the nation with the most successful rugby history in the sport's professional era, looked at what Brown had built inside the Springbok system and decided they wanted it for themselves. Your opponents don't try to hire your attack coach when the system isn't working. They try to hire your attack coach when they see something inside that system that genuinely frightens them. Brown committed, fully committed to South Africa until after the World Cup. Rassie publicly confirmed it, but the fact that New Zealand looked at what was being built inside the Springbok coaching group and wanted it for themselves is its own endorsement, the only most powerful endorsement possible. So, if 2024 was the foundation and 2025 was the proof, what exactly is 2026? Because this is where the picture becomes something that should genuinely concern every team preparing for Australia 2027. Brown described 2024 as the foundation and 2025 as the proof. That makes 2026 the refinement, and refinement in the context of a team that was already breaking records is not a small word. The schedule ahead is the most demanding and the most revealing of the entire World Cup cycle. The Nations Championship beginning in July, England, Scotland, and Wales coming to South African soil in a brand new competition format that gives these fixtures genuine stakes for the first time. Then 4 tests against